Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about my favorite historical fiction. So I'm a very big historical fiction reader. I love history. That's actually what I taught for 2 years as a teacher in high school before moving down to elementary and then doing music. But now I want to share with you some of these books that I think that you would enjoy if you're a historical fiction reader, and they're all Christian historical fiction. It's not exclusively what I read, but today's video is just, they're all Christian historical fiction. In this video, I will talk a lot about Tessa Afshar, which is one of my autobi authors. My favorite author, really, and that would be the majority of the video. But before I get to her books, I am going to talk about another book by a different author. So let's get started. So the first book I'm talking about is by Sarah Sundin, and this is When Twilight Breaks. And I know Paperback and Ponytails was raving about her new book, and honestly, I cannot wait for that one. This is the only Sarah Sundin book that I've read, but I did give this a really high rating. I would say like a 4.5 star rating, but man, she writes very well. This book is about World War II, and it's about a woman who is wanting to be a newspaper reporter, or just like a really big reporter. And so she goes to Germany and wants to report all the things that she sees. And I think she has part Jewish heritage in her, but and that will come to play later. And she goes to Germany and she wants to report what's been going on and the events leading up to World War II. And along the way, she meets a not a scientist, more of like she meets a scientist. He's a professor, and she interviews him and talks to him about his research, and they form a relationship. And it talks about how, you know, they're each affected by what is going on in Germany during the onset of World War II. And it's got different twists and turns, and it was very captivating. I just could not put this book down. So Sarah Sundin, When Twilight Breaks, I would recommend. Okay, so these next few books, or the rest of this video, like I said, is all going to be about Tessa Afshar. I contemplated about doing a Tessa Afshar video where I ranked my favorite books from her, but I haven't read all of them yet, and I just really wanted to do just get her books out there, because I haven't heard a lot about them on YouTube. So I want to be able to share them. So the first one, this one, In a Field of Grace. This one is what Oshina reviewed on her channel, and I went to it. I picked it up after she reviewed it, and I loved it. Oh my gosh! Like, this is if you like romance, boom, here you go. If you like scripture with the book, like this had like a verse for each chapter. And, you know, this one's a psalm, and it says, well, even if my mother and father abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. And it just talks about kind of like that in the chapter, right? But it's just, it was beautiful. This is a retelling of the story of Ruth and Boaz. And like I said before here on my channel, she writes stories, or she picks stories from the Bible, and she writes her, I guess, a fictionalized version of that story, but she uses scripture. So even the minute detail it could talk about, and then they went to Lydia or something, I don't know, some minute detail, and she would add it in here. And then in the story of Ruth and Boaz, it talks about the region where Ruth lived before she moved with Naomi to back to Naomi's homeland. And even the research where Ruth grew up in, and the type of deities the region was known for, the gods that they served, that was researched as well and has been talked about in this book, but in a way to where we can understand. And it's just little things like that, like historical context, to really grip you into the tale. And so if you don't know the story of Ruth and Boaz, Ruth is a young woman who marries into this Jewish family, and her husband dies shortly after, and her sister-in-law suffered the same fate too, with her husband dying. And Naomi is the mother-in-law, and Naomi's husband dies, and so Naomi wants to go back to her homeland, and she she tells her daughters-in-law, go ahead, go back to your own homes, you're still young, you can remarry, I have nothing for you. And Ruth was the one who's like, where you go, I will go, because you're part of me, So she goes with her mother-in-law into the mother-in-law's homeland, and as she helps provide for Naomi, Ruth finds herself working for a man named Boaz, and as a gleaner in his field, and then it has their relationship that blossoms, and he ends up being the kinsman redeemer in the story of Ruth of the Bible. And so that is this retelling, and it's a beautiful, beautiful love story, and I would recommend. This was the kickstart to my love for this the author's books, and so highly recommend. Great place to get started. The In a Field of Grace was a 5-star, and granted, I've given most of her books 5 stars, and so I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the 5-star list, but if I can remember just the 5-star list. And so the next 5-star that I've read from Tessa Afshar is Pearl in the Sand, and isn't that beautiful? I don't know if you can see the shifting of it. I'm not really doing it very well, but it's a rose gold, and this is a retelling of the story of Rahab, and this is their 10th edition. I think it's been out for 10 years already, so they redid the cover and everything. But for those who don't know the story of Rahab, it is back in the Old Testament, and it is the story about, Rahab was a prostitute, and she is known for helping the men from Joshua's army escape the walls of Jericho. And so Joshua's army comes in to look at Jericho and see how they can best defeat them. And the people of Jericho had heard of the army and come to seek them, to try to make sure they don't go back, to Joshua. And Rahab ends up hiding them on the roof part of her house and helps the men escape. But before they leave her house, she's remember us, remember me, please keep me safe when you guys come and take over Jericho. So she already knew these guys were going to come and take over Jericho and eliminate them. And so the spies of Joshua's army were put a scarlet cord outside your window, and and everyone in this household will be saved, essentially. And so this is another retelling. And Tessa always adds romance in her books, one way or another, at least the ones that I've read so far. And so Rahab is also in part of Jesus's genealogy. And so how like Tessa not only uses that short story in Jericho, but you see how thick it is. So it's not all about Jericho. It's about, other things in there. So 5-star, really enjoyed it. From, start to finish. There's nothing like crude in her books either. I mean, there is some tough topics, but they're not like super crude. As far as like, she does talk about the battle a little bit, or how she would think what the battle would look like, and it does like have a little bit of like battle scenes, but again, nothing like too harsh. But again, just the topics, even the concepts that she talks about, and they're all a little different in each of her books. And so this one deals a little bit more with like self-worth, and so yeah, that's another one. Okay, so the other book from her is Daughter of Rome, and I think this is probably one of my favorite covers because of the color combination with the red hair and the blue and just the white or cream, and it's just beautiful. And this one is a New Testament, a story of Priscilla and Aquila. And again, you probably hear maybe 2 paragraphs in the Bible of Priscilla and Aquila, or I mean, maybe a little bit more, but not so much, I guess. But you see how thick that book is? So there's a lot more to it. And this story does talk about a little bit more with grief. And if, I guess a little trigger warning, if you have had a loss of a child, like a miscarriage, or even if you had struggled in the past with anything like abortion, it does talk a little bit about it. And I know can be a sensitive topic. If I can remember correctly, it also talks about infertility a little bit, and In a Field of Grace also kind of talks a little bit about that too. But anyway, so if that's just letting you know, again, it's nothing too descriptive, and it's not something that I think would be a major trigger, but I just wanted to let you know, if this is a book that you were interested in, that it does contain some of those topics. But she's really good at having truth and scripture to even heal those process. And I know it has healed me in my life and my testimony. And so I guess that's why I'm really drawn to her, because she's always has that truth and is not afraid to delve into these topics, but to like encourage and build up. And so anyway, this is a great story. It talks about the founding of the church. It talks about what the church looked like prior to like what we see, today. It's more like what it could have looked like in biblical times. And talks about her meeting Aquila, and even just early church persecution. But really recommend it too. And so anyway, that's another 5-star. Almost done with my 5-star ones. But here's another one, and this is actually the book of the year last year for me by Tessa, and or in my rankings, my top favorite of last year. And this is Land of Silence. And oh my goodness, this actually almost had me in tears. I have felt the emotions that this woman has went through, and I mean, just some of the emotions. You know, we can all feel the same emotions, even when our stories are different. A lot of times, we can feel the same emotions, and I think that held true in this book. This is the story of the woman who bled for 12 years that we read about in the New Testament. And from the get-go, this story just punches your gut. It's how this woman, or just her story, what she went through. And again, I know it's fictionalized, but it still showed, I think, the depth of the possibility of that woman in the Bible, like the real story, the possibility of the emotions she went through when she bled for 12 years. Because if you, I don't know how well you may know of the history of women, and during their time of month, they couldn't really be part of society. They couldn't be touched. They had to be cleansed and all these rituals. And just to imagine having to go through that for 12 years, like nonstop, is hard. And so she's dealt with isolation. She's dealt with, it's hard to even get married, to having to suffer that. In the Bible, it talks about how she was bled financially. And I'm sure she tried so many techniques, and it's like one of those things that you feel, and I could relate, like you try things and only be met with disappointment. And again, I'm not meaning like big like faith things, but I'm just saying like even little things where you're just like you're wanting something so badly, and that you try different things, natural remedies even, and you know that there is a promise, and you want that promise so bad, but you have to wait and you have to be still. And that I'm sure a lot of people could relate. But anyway, I digress. Going back to this book, like it really brought lots of emotions, but it was wonderful. And she meets Jesus. That's what it says in scripture. And when she meets him, it's just a wonderful encounter, and it's as if Jesus is speaking to you. And so man, just thinking I'm just thinking about wanting to read this again. But yeah, I would recommend even starting here. If you are overwhelmed with any of the Tessa Afshar books I've recommended, I would say this one, or even A Field of Grace, but this one was my favorite by far of her work. So anyway, there you go. Okay, so the next two, and I say two because this is her only duology. As far as I know, none of the books seem to be like companions with each other, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were. But her first book, I guess duology she has done, is not really a person specifically in the Bible, but it's more of like the time period, and it's during the time of when Nehemiah went back to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple walls, or to rebuild the walls, I'm sorry. And so this is the duology of that story. But here's the first book in it, and this is called Harvest of Rubies. And she, I think, is the cousin of Nehemiah. So again, it's not really a actual woman in there. At least I don't believe it said. Yeah, I don't believe the Bible talks about Nehemiah having a cousin, but the events and the accounts were from the story of Nehemiah, and so it talks about how one would be during that time period. And so I will say, like, reading the Old Testament is pretty hard, especially when it talks about like the different prophets and the genealogies and just kind of what's going on, like the prophecies during that time. And she does a good job at like interpreting that and making it more like fictionalized to where you can like understand it. So this story is about Sarah, and she is Nehemiah's cousin, and she is a scribe, and she works in the Persian's court as the queen's like head scribe. And she right off the bat, the queen favors her, and it's like arranged a marriage, and the one that she's arranged for is Darius. And let's just say the marriage did not start off well at all. It's almost quite comical of how it all came to be, and even just like what happened. But this really, what happened really hurts the marriage right off the get-go, and it even continues into the second book. It follows that, but it also follows what is going on during the time. And like I said, this was Nehemiah's time period to where he wants to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And so that's what these two books come into play. So that's the first one. And there's the second one, Harvest of Gold. And this takes place when the walls are completed, and like towards the end of this book, when the walls were completed and Nehemiah reads Old Testament prophecies. And I'm not sure which prophet he reads from, but he does read it, and that's what this book kind of talks a little bit more about. But it continues with Sarah and Darius and their relationship, and the struggles that she faces, and how she has to grow through them. And since her husband is born in a Persian society, what that even looks like, and how she has to deal with it as a wife, because I think one of the things were like in Persian society, it was not uncommon for them to have like concubines. And so but you know, like little things like that, that was like a minute detail. It wasn't like the focus of the story, but like little things like that, what else the Persian culture had. And so and I know that she wants her husband to know her God. And so you know, that's this book. I will say, out of all the books that I have read from Tessa, she does very good at closed door things. And granted, all of these books, with the exception of Rahab, but for the most part, like all of the books don't talk about a relationship like a sexual relationship unless they're married. And so, and even then it's like very, I think tastefully done. And so it's closed door, and you know, like between husband and wife. But this one, they are husband and wife, but I will say that these were a little bit more steamy. Didn't deter me from reading the book, but it definitely was just enough. It was just enough, let's just say. But it's, again, nothing crude or anything like that. But just be aware, if you have picked up any of her other books and then you pick up this one, it's like, oh, they talk a little bit more about their relationship. You know, just being aware of that. And that's why I think this one was 4.5, because I think it talked about it a little bit more in this book. In the first book, since the relationship was really rocky, it wasn't like they didn't really spend a lot of time with each other. But in this one, like they were. So I do want to point that out there. So this one was 4.5, first one was 5, and again, good series. Okay, the last one is Jewel of the Nile, and this one is a 4-star read for me. And you know, still good. The story takes place in, I guess, the New Testament, but not a particular person. And it is about a young woman who is born of like Roman descent, and that was from her mother, but she has no idea who her father is. But some clues show, because of her skin and I think hair type, that he could be from the land of Kush. Kush, I think, is what it's called. And so she wants to go and find her father, essentially. And there's just a lot of secrets that have happened that are kept from her, usually by her grandfather. Doesn't want her to find out, and she doesn't have her mother with her because it tells you early on, like, her mother has passed on, and so she lives with her aunt. But the story goes where she's trying to find who her father is, and I guess what happened, why are they not as a family together. And so she meets a man who is the seller of like soaps, like he transports soap to different places, and she gets help from him to find her dad. I forget how that happened. I think she was a stowaway first off, and then he finds her, but I can't remember the details to that. So anyway, she's a baby Christian. The guy is a Christian as well, or like they're newer, I believe, and so, you know, they form that friendship, and the story unfolds from there. So this one's one of her, like, oh, like the mysteries, you know, you don't know what is going to happen, you know, who the father is or anything like that. And so it was surprising, but it was a good book and I enjoyed it. And that's it. Okay, so that was another lengthier video, and I know that I talked a lot about Tessa Afshar books. So, but I got those out there so that y'all will know, and in the future, as I start to read more nonfiction, because I believe I'm almost caught up with all her books. I have like 2 more books from her that I have not read, and I'm currently reading another one from her. But once I'm done with those, I know I will expand more to like other authors. But those I wanted to get out there because I really do like her work and I think that they're great. And Sarah Sundin is my next one that I might binge read over. But yeah, let me know if any of these books sound interesting to you. Are they something that, you know, you may like, or you even read any of these books? I would love to chat with you about that. I could talk about her all day. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.